Hi guys, welcome back to another video. I hope you're all doing good. Now to me this is a very important video. Now I have only just fully read this document in full in the last few days, and I've been sitting on it for a while, and I guess you could say, arrogantly, I thought I knew the basic gist of it. So I didn't prioritise reading this actual document in full, but it turns out that I was wrong. Today we'll be taking a look at the official mobile phone data obtained by David Bristow. This report, I might add, discusses the trial, but is from the 2002 appeal of Jack and Mick. Now, if you don't know who David Bristow is, he was, at the time of the killings, the leading expert in the country on mobile phone data and evidence, and was a star prosecution witness in very different trials around the United Kingdom. Now, interestingly, in the trial of Worms and Steele, David Bristow played a role in the actual defence and effectively switched sides, supporting the actual testimony of Jack Worms, who claimed that the reason his phone was picked up in the area of Rettendon on the night of the murders was because he was picking up a broken down vehicle for Darren Nichols in the Wheatsheaf car park pub, which is about a mile from the location of the murders. Now, I'll be reading David Bristow's official report, and after that, discussing the phone data of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. And I would say that this document, guys, it's a bit of a bombshell, to be honest with you, in my eyes anyway. So as always, please let me know what you guys' thoughts are on the subject in the comments below. It's always great to hear other people's thoughts and feedback, so don't hesitate to let me know what you think. Here is the document, dated 1st of the 5th, 2002, report of David Bristow regarding mobile phone telephone evidence. Summary of opinion. The Criminal Case Review Commission are presently reviewing the case of Mr. Michael Steele, who, with Mr. Jack Worms, has been convicted of murder. In January 2002, Mr. N.J. Price, the case review manager, posted a question relating to mobile phone evidence given at the trial. Given the evidence you, David Bristow, gave to the trial regarding the effect on telephone signals of foliage, to what degree are your original findings enhanced by the latest test carried out under the similar foliage conditions? I've addressed this point within this report. In my opinion, any effects of foliage on the transmission between a mobile phone used in Workhouse Lane and the Hockley Cell site would have been very small compared to the effects of a significant hill which is directly in line of sight between the 2 points. My subsequent tests under foliage conditions similar to those at the time of the murder confirm the results of the test which I made before the trial, and in my opinion my earlier findings are enhanced in that any doubt as to the validity of the earlier tests as a consequence of differing foliage conditions has been eliminated. Mr. Price also posed the question, to what degree are your original findings enhanced by the use of Mr. Worms' mobile phone compared to the equipment used in the tests before the trial? I'd always believed that the best way to carry out the tests was to use Jack Worms' own mobile phone, but this was not possible before the trial. Findings are enhanced in that any doubt as to the validity of the earlier test as a consequence of different foliage conditions has been eliminated. Mr. Price also posed a question, to what degree are your original findings enhanced by the use of Mr. Worms' mobile phone compared to the equipment used in the test before the trial? I had always believed that the best way to carry out the test was to use Jack Worms' own phone, but this was not possible before the trial. My original results were carried out with equipment which I acknowledge might not respond to all the different levels of service provided by the local cell sites in the same way as a mobile phone. In my opinion, my original findings have been enhanced by the subsequent use of a mobile phone to make test calls and the assistance of Vodafone to analyse the test results. The validity of the test results is further enhanced by the use of Jack Wames's actual phone. I maintain the view that the use of the Hackney 54 free cell identity is consistent with the suggestion that the defence that Jack Wames's phone was used at the Wheatsheaf, but not consistent with the prosecution assertion that at 15:59 on December 6, 1995, the phone was used in Workhouse Lane. David Bristow, 1st of May 2002. Figure 1. A section of an ordnance survey map showing the line of sight path between the Wheatsheaf Public House and Workhouse Lane and the Hackney cell site. Figure 2. An enlarged section of the ordnance survey map showing a line of slight paths near the Wheatsheaf and Workhouse Line in greater detail. Expert report relating to additional mobile phone evidence in the case of R versus Steele and Wams. Introduction. In January 1998, Michael Steele and Jack Wales were sentenced to life in prison for the murders of Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe. Part of the evidence at the trial related to the use of mobile phones by Michael Steele and Jack Wales and by Darren Nichols, who claimed to have driven Steele and Nichols to Workhouse Lane, Rettendon on the early evening of December 6, 1995. During the course of the trial, the prosecution introduced evidence in the form of telephone call detail records given in court by various representatives of the mobile phone companies Cellnet, Vodafone and Orange. Solicitors acting for the two defendants instructed Forensic Engineering Associates to examine the call detail records and to prepare expert evidence reports. David Bristow prepared 2 reports and I subsequently gave evidence in the trial. My first report, dated August 30th, 1997, included a theoretical analysis in respect of the Cellnet mobile phone 0860 853 978 used by Michael Steele and a similar analysis of calls made by the Vodafone mobile 0836 215 646 used by Jack Wales. I also examined call detail records related to Darren Nichols' phone 0973 427288 used on the Orange network. Following my theoretical analysis, I concluded that the telephone evidence was not inconsistent with the explanations put forward by the defendants that at around 1800 on December 6, 1995, Michael Steele's phone was used close to the village of Bullfan, and at 1859 Jack Wames's phone was used in the car park of the Wheatsheaf Public House in Rettendon. On a theoretical basis, the telephone records for the 2 phones were also not inconsistent with assertions by the prosecution that at 1800 hours Michael Steele's phone was used at the Halfway House Public House in Chidderditch, and in 1859 Jack Wames's phone was used in Workhouse Lane, Rettendon. I was less inclined to accept the assertion by Darren Nichols that the service provided to his Orange phone in the car park of the Wheatsheaf Public House was very poor. The Orange Cellnet at Rettendon is in line sight and less than 2 kilometres distant from the Wheatsheaf Public House. I would have expected a good service from the Orange network at that location. Furthermore, Darren Nichols claimed to have been in Meadow Road, Rettendon, when he received the calls from Jack Wales at 1859. These calls were served by an Orange cell site at Basildon, which is not the closest site and not the site which would have been expected to provide the best service to an Orange phone in Meadow Road. Following the issue of my first report, I was instructed by the solicitors acting for the defence to carry out practical measurements to see if it was possible to determine whether it was more likely that Jack Wames's phone was used at the Wheatsheaf or in Workhouse Lane, and whether Darren Nichols' version of events was credible. I carried out these tests on September the 17th and September the 24th, 1997. To evaluate the service provided by the Orange network, I was able to engage the services of Mr. David Cole, an Orange field engineer, who brought with him a comprehensive test set suitable to measure, at any location, the service provided from each of the local Orange cell sites. The results of my tests are contained in a report dated September the 26th, 1997. We found that the Orange network offered a good level of service at the Wheatsheaf car park. From Meadow Road, although at most points the service provided by the Basildon cell site was inferior to that offered by other local sites in the Basildon The Basildon site service was nevertheless generally adequate to provide a service. I cannot dismiss Darren Nichols' claim that he was in Meadow Road when he received Jack Wilms's call. I've been told that Jack Wilms says that he made 2 attempts to call Darren Nichols at around 7 p.m. on December the 6th, 95, but that each call failed. The call records show that the first of these 2 calls, as having been made at 18:59 and 21 seconds, via cell identity 724-1, the Sector 1 antenna of the cell site 724 at Bakers Wood in Gatestone. The call lasted just 1 second. The second call at 18:59 was served by cell and 32 seconds was served by cell identity 54-3, the Sector 3 antenna of the Hockley cell site, and lasted around 4 seconds. Jack Wilms says he tried unsuccessfully to call Darren Nichols from the car park at the Wheatsea to tell him that he had successfully loaded his, that's Nichols' broken down car onto the car transporter trailer. The prosecution alleged that Jack Wilms was in Workhouse Lane and the 4-second call was the sufficient duration to tell Darren Nichols to return to the lane and pick him up, together with Michael Steele. In December 95, the service provided by the Vodafone analog mobile phone in the Retnard area was poor, such that calls were likely to fail. I needed, however, to examine the service provided at each of the 2 locations from cell identity 7241 in Gatestone and cell identity 54-3 Hockley. I was unable to obtain the services of Vodafone to carry out a survey, and I carried out the measurements myself. The test equipment I used was a radio communications receiver able to set to the particular frequencies of the analog mobile phone service. I took measurements at the Wheatsea and at Workhouse Lane. The measurements indicated that both in Gatestone 7241 and Hockley 54-3 could provide service, albeit a poor service to a Vodafone mobile phone at the Wheatsea. Also, at the entrance to Workhouse Lane, I detected the control channel from Ingatestone 7241 at a level which I felt would be adequate to provide service. However, I had difficulty in detecting a service from the Hockley 54-3 anywhere along the lane. Where I did detect a signal from Hockley 54-3, it was at a signal level considerably beneath the levels offered by the other cell sites. I believed it was unlikely that the user of a Vodafone analog mobile phone in Workhouse Lane would ever be served by the Hockley 54-3 service. If the measurements which I took in September 97 were representative of the conditions on December 6, 95, my test suggests that Jack Wilms was not in Workhouse Lane when he made the call to Darren Nichols at 18:59. In my opinion, the reason that Hockley 54-3 can't be detected in Workhouse Lane is clear cut. There is a hill in Retnard to the south of Workhouse Lane which effectively blocks the line of sight path between the user of a phone in Workhouse Lane and the cell site antenna which is mounted on the water tower in Hockley. Although cellular phone radio signals are to some extent diffracted, that's bent, over a hilltop, as far as radio waves are concerned, Workhouse Lane falls within the shadow of the hill. The same is not true of the Wheatsea, which has a clearer line of sight to the Hockley cell site. I carried out a similar exercise in relation to Michael Steele's phone calls made to Jack Wilms at 18:03 and 18:09 on December 6, 95. Both calls were served by BT Cellnet cell site at 0854 at Childerditch. I was told that Michael Steele had said that he had made the calls and he was close to the village of Bullfan. Conversely, the prosecution alleged that he was in the car park of the Halfway House public house. I indicated the results of my test in a report dated the 4th of November 97. In my opinion, the calls could well have been made close to Bullfan, but it was unlikely that they would have been made from the Halfway House. Just as Workhouse Lane is screened from the Hockley cell site by the Retnard Hill, so the Halfway House is shielded from the Childerditch site by raised ground known as Jury Hill. At the trial, Simon Collins of Orange gave evidence showing the possible use of Darren Nichols' phone in the Retnard area at 1848 and 1859. Robert Foxwell of Vodafone showed that Jack Wilms' phone could have been used near Retnard at 1859, and Dennis Clayton of BT Cellnet showed the use of Michael Steele's phone in the general area of Childerditch. I am not aware that any of these views were challenged by the defence. Cell site analysis is not an exact process. However, although I cannot disprove the prosecution's view of events, the call detail records by Jack Wames's mobile phone and for Michael Steele's phone were, in my opinion, more consistent with the explanations put forward by the defendants than the claims made by the prosecution. I was aware that it might be argued in court that the measurements I carried out and the conclusions I had drawn had certain weaknesses. The Vodafone service might have changed between the time of the murder and my tests, to the extent that my tests were invalid. The test equipment which I had used to access the level of service at the Wheatsheaf and the Workhouse Lane was of good quality, but was uncalibrated. Furthermore, the reception characteristics of the scanning receiver which I used are not properly representative of an analogue mobile phone. I had addressed these 2 points. In December 1995, Vodafone were in the process of updating their service from the older TACS analogue mobile phone system to the present-day GSM digital system. I have received assurances from Vodafone that although the analogue service was being maintained, with the advert of the digital system, the analogue service was not being upgraded. It was reasonable to assume that as far as the Vodafone system was concerned, the state of the Vodafone system at the time of my test was representative of the system at the time of the murder. The ideal method to indicate whether Jack Wames's phone could have made the call at 1859 for Workhouse Lane was, in my opinion, to make a series of calls using a Vodafone mobile phone at each of these 2 locations, and from the call detail records, note from which cell site served the calls at each location. The characteristics of mobile phones vary from model to model, and lesser extent between different samples of the same model of phone. It was from this reason that I attempted to obtain Jack Wames's own phone to reduce any uncertainties concerning the tests. Unfortunately, my instructing solicitors were unable to obtain the release of Jack Wames's phone from the Essex police. I was not unduly concerned. At the Wheatsheaf, I detected what I believed to be poor but probable adequate signal levels, both from Ingatestone 7241 and the Hockley 54.3. My test equipment could not determine the quality of service from these 2 cell identities, but there was no doubt in my mind that signals from both cell identities could be received at the Wheatsheaf. On the other hand, the signal I had detected from the Hockley 54.3 and Workhouse Lane was very weak and considerably beneath the levels of signals from other local cell sites, such that I felt confident that the user of a Vodafone analogue mobile phone in Workhouse Lane would not be served by Hockley 54.3. In court, the prosecution suggested to me that my results were not truly representative, particularly because the tests had not been carried out in the autumn and there were leaves on the trees, and the murder took place in the winter when there were fewer leaves. I was asked whether foliage affected the passage of mobile phone signals, and I confirmed that foliage did marginally affect the passage of radio signals. Strictly it is the presence of moisture in the leaves which causes any attenuation of radio signals. As far as to conditions, the attenuation of phone signals by the foliage might be significant, but in my view the effects of any foliage in that part of Essex would be very small compared with the fact that between Hockley and Workhouse Lane there is significant hill which blocks the signals far more effectively than any foliage. The same is true to a lesser extent between the BT Cellnet cell site at Childevich and the halfway house where the signals are degraded by the presence of Jury Hill. I have subsequently had the opportunity to examine a transcript of that part of the summing up by Mr. Justice Hidden, which dealt with the telephone evidence. Whilst the judge's summing up is generally in accordance with what I remember of my evidence, it did not, in my view, convey the points which I had hoped to put over, namely, that my interpretation of the evidence of the call detail records for December the 6th, 1995 was that A. If Jack Wames's phone had been used in Rettendon at 1859, it might not have been used at the Wheatsheaf, but it is very unlikely that it was used at Workhouse Lane. B. If Michael Steele's phone was used in the vicinity of the Childernitz cell site 1803 and 1809, it might have been used close to Bolfan, but it is unlikely that it was used at the halfway house. C. Darren Nichols' statement of his whereabouts at 1859 was unlikely to be correct. Subsequent tests. After the trial, for my own satisfaction, I wanted to repeat the test using Jack Wilms's actual phone. My instructed solicitors had difficulty in persuading the Essex police to release the phone, but it was eventually agreed that I could have the phone for a strictly limited period, subject to me giving an undertaking that the phone would not be adjusted or modified in any way. Officers of the Essex police then assisted me in replacing the failed phone battery and in charging the new battery prior to my tests. I was anxious that the independent nature of my tests should be totally beyond question, and I asked that an officer from Essex police should witness the tests. This was not possible, but I was fortunate to obtain the help of Mr. John Little, a local councillor who agreed to oversee the tests. Vodafone gave their assistance in putting Jack Wilms's phone back online and in agreeing to provide me with copies of the call data records. Despite my belief that in this case foliage had little effect on the propagation of the phone signals, I arranged for the test to be carried out on the 18th of January 2000, when the foliage conditions were similar to the conditions at the time of the murder. Also, in the best of my knowledge, the Vodafone TACS analogue phone system had remained unchanged since the date of the murders. The tests were carried out. 1. With Jack Wilms's phone, which had been stored by the police since his arrest. 2. With the Vodafone TACS systems unchanged, and, at the same time of year as the murder, the tests were, I believe, carried out under conditions closely representative of the conditions at the time and the date of the murders. The results of the test are contained in my report dated the 22nd of February 2000. Of a total of 20 calls made at various locations in the car park of the Wheatsheaf, 7 were served by Hockley 54-3 and 3 by Ingatestone 7241. The remaining 10 calls were served by other cell sites in the Chelmsford area, including 5 calls served by Hockley 54-1, the north-east facing antenna of the Hockley cell site. Of a total of 41 calls made from different points along the relevant length of Workhouse Lane, 15 were served by Ingatestone 7241. There were no calls served by Hockley 54-3. The remaining 26 calls were served by other cell sites in the Chelmsford area, including 4 calls by Hockley 54-1. I should emphasise that the tests were carried out blind, in that there was no way I or anyone else could have known which cell site would serve Jack Wilms's phone at a particular point in Workhouse Lane where the phone was used for each test call. The actual cell site used was not known until Vodafone was able to analyse the data approximately 1 month after the tests took place. Jack Wilms's phone was returned to Essex Police on the completion of the tests on January the 18th, 2000. When the results of the tests were received, they served to confirm my earlier views that when Jack Wilms made his call at 1859 on the 6th of December 95, he might well have been in the car park at the Wheatsheaf, but it is unlikely he could have been at Workhouse Lane. Service from the Hockley cell site. In my report on the test, which I carried out with Jack Wilms's phone dated February 2000, I showed that although none of the test calls were made from Workhouse Lane was served by Hockley 54-3, the cell site used by Jack Wilms at the 1859 on December 6, 95, a small number, 4 out of 41 of the test calls made from Workhouse Lane were served by call identity 54-1, the Sector 1 antenna of the Vodafone Hockley cell site. The basic configuration of each cell site on the Vodafone analogue TACS included 3 transmitting antennas, with each antenna providing service over a normal 120 degrees around the site, that is to say, plus or minus 60 degrees around the bore site or midpoint of the coverage angle. In practice, the best coverage was provided over some plus or minus 40 degrees with reduced coverage of up to plus or minus 70 degrees. There was a normal arrangement for the Vodafone analogue cell sites in which the 3 antennas were directed as below. Sector bore site angle. Sector 1, 90 degrees due east. Sector 2, 210 degrees, approximately southwest. Sector 3, 330 degrees, approximately northwest. In practice, the antenna angles of any particular cell site can vary significantly with the normal values. In carrying out my analysis prior to the trial, I've been advised by Vodafone that the antenna of the Hockley Sector 3 service was directed at a compass angle of 330 degrees, the standard angle for a Sector 3 antenna. However, I was provided with coverage plots from the Hockley 54.3 which suggest that the true orientation of the antenna might have been closer to 310 degrees. In my view, it's perfectly clear why Jack Wilms's phone would not have been served by Hockley 54.3 if he was in Workhouse Lane. There is a hill between Workhouse Lane and the Hockley cell site which effectively blocks the line of sight path to the cell site. I now produce my figures 1 and 2, copies of the part of the Ordnance Survey map of the area. The map shows the hill at Rettendon Hall and the newfound Hall fruit farm. I have plotted the profile of the land between Workhouse Lane and the Hockley cell site, and note that this hill effectively shields Workhouse Lane from the Hockley cell site. The car park at the Wheatsheaf has a clearer, though still not perfect, line of sight to Hockley. I remain unsure of the means whereby signals from the Hockley 54.1 antenna were able to reach Workhouse Lane. I've recently been in contact with Vodafone, but have been advised that there are now no records available to indicate the orientation of this antenna in '95. The radio signals which made up the communication path between the cell site and the handset are subject to reflection from solid objects, including the terrain itself. In fact, multipath interference, a phenomenon which occurs from the signal of the transmitter to the receiver, when the signal from the transmitter to the receiver arrives via several reflected paths in addition to the direct path, can cause significant problems in the modem GSM digital service. I have concluded that the unexpected service from Hockley 54.1, which I found in my January 2000 tests, is both at Workhouse Lane and at the Wheatsheaf, must have been about as a result of reflection from some geographical feature. It is an uncomfortable fact that the Vodafone analogue service has been disconnected and that the modern GSM antennas on the Hockley cell site have different orientations. I do not believe that the reason for the apparently anomalous service for the Hockley 54.1 antenna, which I found in January 2000 at the Wheatsheaf and at Workhouse Lane, can now be established. Nevertheless, this does not modify the opinion which I have expressed throughout, that whereas my tests have indicated that the records of Jack Wilms's phone calls at 18:59 on December the 6th, 95 are consistent with him being at the Wheatsheaf, my tests do not support the prosecution assertion that the calls were made from Workhouse Lane. So guys, what do you think? It's compelling to say the least. I mean, in my personal opinion. Now, I've been interested in this case since I was a child, and I've never trusted the police. So, understandably, I don't, and I've never trusted the convictions fully. But I've always been torn between wanting Jack and Mick to be innocent and believing that they were guilty. Now, when I say wanting them to be innocent, like the fact, I would prefer them to be guilty in a sense that it makes me so sick to my stomach to think that two innocent men served all that time in prison, you know. But then again, you know, well, not then again, I just don't, it just doesn't, to me, it just doesn't, it doesn't ring tight, you know. I've always wanted to know the truth, and the thing with this case, it's almost like the case that sort of keeps on giving, you know, because I did think there's a good chance that they're innocent, but I've always think there's a chance that they've been guilty. A few things that have pushed me towards thinking that they're in fact guilty is the fact that the alibis were not submitted until 2 weeks before the start of the trial. You know, you would think that you would, if you had, you know, a rock solid alibi, even if you did choose to give a no comment interview, that you would give that alibi, or at least give it to your solicitor to give to the police, because If you were innocent, you were innocent. You know, but you know, another thing that's always sort of made me think they could be guilty was Jack's alibi about the letterbox, which was proven to be a lie. I mean, why did he lie about that? You know, and also the mobile phone evidence. Until I read this report, now in my mind, I was thinking, although I don't trust that man, Darren Nichols could be telling partly the truth, because how could he lie and predict the phone data of the two men being in Redden that night? But it turns out that the phone data does not support that claim at all. I knew that Jack's position whilst making the 1859 call was certainly being challenged, but the fact that the phone expert is saying that Mick was most likely in Bullfan, to me, personally, is a huge slab of icing on the cake for me. Let's take a look on the map. So, Bullfan is about 15 miles from Rettendon and where Michael Steele claimed to have been when he made the calls. And yeah, it's a game changer for me, to be honest. If you saw my video on potential suspects, and you'll know that Jack and Mick both featured on that list, but now this reduces the evidence against the two men, and really, for me personally, reduces the possibility that they were actually guilty of the triple murders at all. I mean, this case, like I said, I guess is a gift that just keeps on giving in some ways, you know. Now, moving on to the phone data of the three deceased men, we do have the call logs of the evening of December the 6th, but as crime scenes and courtroom pointed out, Essex police have actually redacted some of these calls. Now, these records, you know, being redacted is majorly suspicious. I mean, how can they even be able to do that? Now, we know that Pat Tate apparently made a phone call to someone related to the Tanning Can cartel. I believe either Jesse Gale or Dean Hegarty, better known as Mr. D in court. Now, what I don't understand, and I guess I don't know, is whether or not this was known to the defence at the time, or whether or not it was brought up in court. Now, if it was known to the defence, then I guess it makes sense, because if it was known by the defence, then I can't get my head round the fact that it was not a key issue in the whole defence structure. We also know that man Mick Bowman made a call to Pat Tate around an hour before he was supposedly killed. Now, please guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your opinions. So yeah, as before guys, if you're enjoying the videos, don't forget to give them a like and a share and subscribe to the channel to get notifications as soon as I post a new video, and I'll see you in the next one. Sweet.